My brother attacked me during an argument. Mom muttered, "Don't ruin his reputation over this." But the doctor noticed the marks, looked me in the eye, and said, "You don't have to cover for him." Then she picked up the phone. I was 23 when I realized that family has your back didn't really apply to mine. My name's Lucas, and if you had told me a year ago that one day I'd be sitting in a hospital room, holding an ice pack to my face while my mom begged me not to ruin my brother's future, I'd have laughed it off as something out of a bad TV drama. But here we are. I grew up in a house where my brother Adam was the golden child, and I was, well, I guess you could say I was the responsible one. The one who didn't get into trouble, the one who did his homework, the one who kept his head down. I thought that would earn me respect. Instead, it earned me invisibility. If Adam broke a window, it was my fault for not watching him. If he failed a test, I got lectured about being a better influence. It was like I was the parent half the time, and the worst part is I actually believed that was normal. When I moved out at 19, it felt like escaping gravity. I got a small apartment, started working as a tech support guy, and quietly pieced together a life that was mine. I'd still visit on weekends, try to keep the peace, show up for family dinners, the usual. But every visit was a reminder that nothing had changed. Adam was still the center of attention, still the one my parents hovered over like he was some kind of delicate prize. "He's just figuring things out," Mom would say whenever I asked why he still didn't have a job. Figuring things out at 25, while I was paying my own rent and buying my own groceries. Sure, the night everything shifted started like any other weekend visit. I came over for dinner, mostly out of guilt. Mom was already fussing over Adam's latest business idea, which sounded suspiciously like a pyramid scheme, while Dad sat in his chair pretending not to hear the passive-aggressive digs Adam threw my way. "Must be nice," Adam said between bites of mashed potatoes, "having no responsibilities except answering phones all day." I let it slide. I always let it slide, until he brought up money. "You know," he said casually, like we were talking about the weather, "Mom and Dad were saying you should help me get my car fixed. I mean, you've got savings, right? You don't even have kids. What do you need it for?" That was the first crack in my calm. I told him no, plain and simple. I wasn't funding his constant stream of disasters. And maybe that's what did it. The word no, because he laughed, pushed his chair back, and said something that hit me like a sucker punch. "No wonder nobody calls you. You're selfish. You've always been selfish." I don't even remember standing up. I just remember the shouting, the kitchen suddenly feeling too small, and then his hand connecting with my face. It wasn't a slap. It was a full-on punch, the kind that made my ears ring and my vision go white for a second. I stumbled back into the counter, and Mom was there in a flash, not to check on me, but to grab Adam's arm. "That's enough," she snapped, and then she turned to me with this look, this pleading, desperate look, and whispered, "Don't make a scene. Please. You'll ruin his reputation if you call anyone." I just stood there, one hand on my cheek, stunned. That was the moment something in me quietly snapped. Not dramatically, not like in the movies, just a clean break inside. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I grabbed my coat, walked out to my car, and drove myself straight to urgent care because my face was swelling fast and my head was pounding. I figured they'd give me some ice, maybe a painkiller, and send me home. I didn't expect the doctor to notice the bruising on my ribs when I lifted my shirt to breathe easier. "What happened here?" she asked, her voice calm but sharp in a way that made me feel seen for the first time that night. I hesitated. Old habits die hard. I almost lied, almost said I fell or bumped into something. But something about the way she was looking at me, steady, unflinching, made the words stick in my throat. She put her clipboard down, crouched a little so we were eye level, and said softly, "You don't have to cover for him." It felt like someone had just cut a rope I didn't know was tied around my chest. I told her everything. About Adam, about the punch, about the years of being pushed aside. She listened without interrupting, and when I was done, she didn't just nod and send me home. She reached for the phone on the counter. "Wait, what are you doing?" I asked, heart hammering. "Calling it in," she said simply. "This isn't just a family argument. This is assault." And that's where everything started to spiral in a way I couldn't have predicted. When I left the urgent care that night, my cheek was still throbbing, my ribs wrapped, and my head spinning, not just from the impact, but from what had just happened. I sat in my car for a good 10 minutes staring at the steering wheel, thinking about what I'd just done. Reporting Adam wasn't something you could just take back. It was official now. A nurse had taken photos. The doctor had documented everything. A detective was going to call me the next day. And the crazy part? For the first time in years, I felt lighter. But that feeling didn't last long. The next morning, my phone started buzzing before I even had my first sip of coffee. Mom's name lit up the screen. I let it go to voicemail. 10 seconds later, she called again. And again. By the third call, I picked up, bracing myself. Lucas. Her voice was sharp, frantic, like I'd set the house on fire. What did you do? The police just called me, asking questions about what happened. Do you have any idea what you've done to your brother? I took a slow breath, keeping my voice even. I told the truth. There was a beat of silence before she hissed. You've always been dramatic. It was one punch. One. And you know how stressed he's been lately. You could have handled this privately. He hit me hard enough to send me to urgent care, I said flatly. That's not something we handle over coffee and a handshake. She made a frustrated noise, the kind she used to make when I wouldn't eat my vegetables as a kid. You're overreacting. You know Adam's temper. You've provoked him before. Provoked him? My voice went cold. So now it's my fault I got hit. I'm saying you need to think about your family, she said, her voice softening into that coaxing, guilt-laden tone I knew too well. Your brother has a future. If this sticks, he could get a record. No job will take him. His whole life will be ruined. Is that really what you want? I stared at the floor, jaw tight. The old me might have caved right there. I might have apologized, promised to fix it, pretended it was all fine just to keep the peace. But that invisible rope the doctor cut last night, it was gone for good. It's not my job to protect him from the consequences of what he did, I said quietly, and before she could say another word, I hung up. That set the tone for the next few days. When I went back to my apartment that evening, there were already 3 texts from Dad waiting. Call your mother. You can still drop the charges. This is tearing the family apart. The irony of that last one made me laugh out loud. Tearing the family apart? Adam threw the first punch, not me. But the narrative was already shifting, just like it always did. Adam was the victim now. I was the problem. 2 days later, I got the first accidental snub. I stopped by my parents' house to pick up some mail that still got delivered there. Mom opened the door, and I could tell right away she wasn't expecting me. She didn't hug me, didn't even smile. We're having dinner, she said shortly, stepping aside. I walked in and saw Adam sitting at the table, smirking like the cat that ate the canary. He had a bandage on his knuckle, like he wanted everyone to see how hurt he was. There were plates set, but there was no fourth place for me. I grabbed the envelope with my name on it from the counter, pretending not to notice. You're not staying? Mom asked, her voice all innocent surprise. No, I said. I wasn't invited. She sighed dramatically, like I was the one being cold. We just thought maybe you'd want some space. Right? I said, letting the word hang in the air. Adam chuckled under his breath, and that was enough to make my hands clench at my sides. When I walked out, I heard Mom say softly, see, he doesn't even want to be here anymore. I didn't slam the door, but I wanted to. Over the next week, it became a pattern. Family group chat? Suddenly silent whenever I messaged. Sunday dinner? No invitation. When I stopped by unannounced, Adam was parked in the driveway with his friends, laughing and blasting music, and when I got out of my car, one of them muttered, careful, man, he might call the cops on you. Adam grinned. Yeah, better watch yourself. Lucas is real sensitive these days. I didn't take the bait. I just walked inside, but I could feel their eyes on my back, hear their laughter following me like smoke. Inside, Mom was sitting at the table clipping coupons. She looked up with that tight smile she reserved for strangers. You didn't tell me you were coming, she said, like I'd barged in on a private meeting. I came to grab the rest of my things, I said simply. She sighed, putting the scissors down. Lucas, can't we just forget about this? Your brother feels awful. I actually laughed at that one, a short, bitter sound that didn't feel like me. He feels awful? Has he told you that? Or are you just assuming? Her lips pressed into a line. You've changed, she said softly, like it was an accusation. Yeah, I said, meeting her gaze. I have. I could see the flicker of something in her expression, maybe realization, maybe anger, but she didn't say anything else. That night, I lay awake in my apartment, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how quiet my phone had been all week. No calls from Dad except the guilt trip ones. No texts from my cousins asking if I was coming to Sunday lunch. It was like I'd been erased. And the strange thing was, it hurt less than I expected. It hurt, yes, but it also felt like a clean slate. Still, the tension kept ratcheting up. The detective finally called me on Thursday, asked if I wanted to proceed with charges. I said yes. When I hung up, my hands were shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline. For the first time, I wasn't playing their game. 2 days later, I ran into my aunt at the grocery store. She cornered me by the produce section, her voice low but cutting. "Lucas, sweetheart, I heard what happened. You really called the police? Over a little fight? You know boys will be boys." I stopped her right there. "Boys will be boys stops applying when you're old enough to rent a car," I said. She looked taken aback, then tooted. "Your mother is worried sick. You need to think about how this looks to the family." I almost laughed. Funny, no one seemed worried about how it looked when I was the one with a swollen face. By the time I got home, Mom had left another voicemail. This time her tone was sharp, almost cold. "If you go through with this, don't expect us to pick up the pieces when your brother's life falls apart. You'll be on your own." It should have scared me. Instead, it felt like a strange kind of freedom. Because for the first time, I realized I already was on my own, and maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. But deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The way Adam had smirked at that dinner table, the way Mom's voice had hardened, there was a storm coming, and it was going to hit harder than anything I'd faced yet. And part of me, the part that had been quiet for too long, was almost ready for it. For about 2 weeks, it seemed like things were quiet, almost suspiciously so. No angry calls from Mom, no sarcastic texts from Adam, no cryptic family group chat messages designed to make me feel left out. It was eerie, like that stillness before a thunderstorm when the air feels too heavy, too warm. Part of me almost dared to hope that maybe, just maybe, they had realized this had gone too far. Maybe they were finally letting go. I started getting back into a routine. Work, gym, dinner alone in my apartment. I even caught myself humming in the kitchen one night, which felt strange after weeks of walking around like a wound that hadn't healed. Then, one Wednesday, Mom called. Her tone was light. "Lucas, honey, we're having a little get-together this weekend for Adam. Nothing big, just family. You should come." The last time she'd invited me to anything, it was to talk it out, which had turned into 3 people lecturing me at the kitchen table about forgiveness. But something in her voice was different this time. Softer. Maybe this was their way of extending an olive branch. I said I'd think about it, but by Friday I'd convinced myself it was worth going. Part of me still wanted to believe things could go back to normal, or at least some new version of normal where I didn't feel like an outsider in my own family. Saturday came, bright and too warm for early spring, and I drove over. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw way more cars than I expected. Not just close family, but cousins, neighbors, even a couple of Adam's old high school friends I hadn't seen in years. This wasn't a little get-together. I walked in, and the smell of barbecue hit me. Laughter and music drifted from the backyard. I followed the noise, trying not to overthink it. Maybe it really was just a family party. Maybe they were trying to include me again. I stepped onto the patio and saw Adam standing by the grill, beer in hand, grinning like he was hosting his own victory parade. People were clapping him on the back, congratulating him. That's when I saw it. A banner strung across the porch in big, bold letters. "Congrats, Adam." My stomach dropped. I scanned the crowd, looking for Mom or Dad. Mom spotted me first, weaving through the guests with a tight smile. "You made it," she said, as though I'd been invited to a wedding I almost skipped. "What's going on?" I asked carefully. "Oh, didn't Adam tell you?" She sounded almost amused. "The charges are being dropped. The DA declined to prosecute. We thought it called for a celebration." The words hit me like cold water. Adam turned then, raising his beer toward me. "Hey, little brother. Guess I'm not a criminal after all." Everyone laughed. It felt like the ground tilted under me. This wasn't just a get-together. This was a victory party, and I was the unwilling guest of honor. I could feel the heat rising in my face, not from the sun, but from the humiliation washing over me in waves. They had invited me here, stood me in the middle of their yard, and turned my assault into a punchline. Adam walked over, still grinning. "No hard feelings, right? Come on, you can't stay mad forever. You made your point." "My point," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. "Yeah," he said breezily. "You scared me for a minute there. But look, no harm done. I'm fine, you're fine. Let's just put it behind us." People were watching now. I could feel all those eyes on me, waiting to see if I'd play along. If I'd smile and clap him on the back and make everything good again. Mom's hand found my arm, her grip just a little too tight. Lucas, she said under her breath, please, don't ruin this for him. I looked down at her hand on my sleeve, then back at Adam, who was still standing there, smirking like this was the best joke he'd ever told. I don't remember deciding to move, but suddenly I was walking back into the house, past the kitchen, past the living room, to the hallway where all the old family photos still hung. I stopped in front of one of me and Adam as kids, him with his arm around my shoulder, both of us missing teeth, grinning like we didn't know what life was yet. I used to love that photo. Now it felt like a lie. When I finally went back outside, the party had moved on without me. Adam was telling some exaggerated story about the night of the fight, and everyone was hanging on his every word. And you should have seen the look on his face, he said, laughing. Like he thought I was going to get locked up for real. Come on, I barely touched him. The laughter that followed that line was the kind that crawled under your skin, loud, careless, cruel. I froze just inside the doorway, watching them laugh at my expense, at my pain. Something inside me went very, very still. It wasn't anger, not exactly. It wasn't even heartbreak. It was colder than that. A kind of clarity that settled over me like ice. I turned and left without saying a word. Nobody followed me. When I got back to my apartment, there was already a new message in the family group chat. Thanks everyone for coming. So glad we could all put this behind us. And right below it, Adam had posted a picture of himself holding his beer under that stupid banner, grinning like he'd just won a medal. The caption read, "No hard feelings." I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. Then I turned my phone off and set it face down on the table. This wasn't just favoritism anymore. This wasn't just boys will be boys or a family looking the other way. This was a line they had crossed and then lit on fire behind them. And sitting there in my quiet apartment, I realized something I should have known a long time ago. They weren't going to stop. Not until I made them. The first few days after that so-called celebration felt like walking through fog. I woke up the next morning with that heavy, hollow feeling in my chest, the kind you get after a breakup or a death in the family. Except no one had died. No one except the version of me who still believed my family would ever stand up for me. I sat at the edge of my bed staring at my phone, half expecting a message from Mom. An apology, maybe, or at least an explanation. Nothing came. By noon, I opened the group chat just to see if anyone had mentioned me. They hadn't, but there were plenty of messages. Pictures of everyone smiling, clinking glasses. Comments like, "Best night ever," and "So proud of you, Adam." It was like I hadn't even been there, like my presence, my humiliation, was just a background prop in Adam's redemption arc. I turned my phone off and left it off for the rest of the weekend. By Monday, I was a ghost in my own life. I went to work, answered tickets, smiled at my coworkers when they asked how my weekend was, lied and said good. At night, I'd come home to my silent apartment, heat up leftovers I didn't even want to eat, and sit in front of the TV without really watching. One night, I dug out an old photo album I hadn't opened in years. It was buried in a box in my closet, still smelling faintly of the cedar chest it had lived in back at my parents' house. I flipped through it slowly. Birthdays, school plays, holidays where I was always just slightly off to the side while Adam took center stage. There was one picture, Christmas morning, maybe 10 years ago, where Adam was unwrapping a huge box, grinning from ear to ear. I was sitting next to him holding a sweater, smiling politely. I remembered that morning so clearly. Mom had told me she didn't have enough in the budget for the guitar I wanted, then turned around and bought Adam a dirt bike. At the time, I had shrugged it off. That's just how it is, I told myself. Now, sitting alone in my apartment with the silence pressing in, I felt that same small, sharp sting in my chest, except this time I didn't push it down. I let it hurt. I stayed like that for hours, just flipping through those photos, remembering every small cut, every moment I had swallowed my feelings to keep the peace. And for the first time, I asked myself why I had done that for so long. By the end of the week, the isolation started to turn into something darker. I ran into two of my cousins at the grocery store. They didn't see me at first. They were standing by the self-checkout talking in low voices, laughing. "Did you see Adam's post?" One of them said. "Yeah, I can't believe Lucas actually called the cops on his own brother. So dramatic. Total overreaction. No wonder he's always by himself." They noticed me then, and their smiles froze. I didn't say a word. just grabbed my bag and walked out. By the time I got home, my chest felt tight, my hands shaky. I sat in my car in the parking lot for a full 10 minutes trying to get my breathing under control. The worst part wasn't what they said. The worst part was that a tiny, ugly voice inside me whispered that they might be right. Was I overreacting? Was I making things worse by not just letting it go? I hated that I even entertained the thought. But when you've been gaslit for most of your life, your brain learns to second-guess itself. I stopped answering calls entirely after that. Stopped going out except for work. My apartment became a little island where no one could reach me. But instead of feeling safe, it just made me feel smaller. I would lie awake at night staring at the ceiling, replaying that day in the yard over and over. The banner, the laughter, the way Adam had looked at me like he'd won something. It was like the betrayal had lodged itself under my skin, an itch I couldn't scratch. And yet, somewhere in the middle of all that pain, something else started to take root. It was small at first, little thoughts, quiet and dangerous. I started thinking about how Mom had sounded when she said, "Don't ruin this for him." How Dad had stayed silent through everything. How Adam had turned my pain into a punchline. And I started asking myself questions I'd never dared ask before. Why did I still keep my savings account joint with my dad? Just because it's easier for emergencies? Why did I still let my parents' address stay on my car registration when I hadn't lived there in 4 years? Why did I keep showing up to family dinners just to sit in silence while everyone laughed at Adam's jokes? Little by little, I started making changes. Quiet ones. I went to the bank and moved my savings into a new account in my name only. I updated my address on every piece of mail I could think of. I started a folder on my computer, tucked away where no one could see, where I kept every medical bill, every photo from urgent care, every voicemail from Mom asking me to do the right thing. It wasn't revenge yet. Not exactly. But it was something. One Friday night, as I sat in my kitchen eating takeout, I caught my reflection in the dark window. My face still had the faint yellow shadow of a bruise, but my eyes looked different, harder, more focused. I didn't recognize myself. And maybe that was a good thing. Because whoever I was turning into, he wasn't going to keep letting them walk all over him. For now, though, I stayed quiet. I didn't confront them. Didn't tell them about the changes I was making. Didn't respond to the messages trickling into my inbox asking me to come around. I let them think I was still licking my wounds. And late at night, when the apartment was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator, I'd sit there with that growing folder of documents and think. If they wanted a war, they were about to find out I could fight one. The shift started small, so small I barely noticed it at first. It began with a single Saturday morning when I woke up earlier than usual, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. The sun was streaming through the blinds, and for once, instead of lying there scrolling through old messages that made me angry, I just got up. I cleaned the entire apartment that morning. Dusted, vacuumed, scrubbed the counters until they shined. When I was done, I stood in the middle of the living room, hands on my hips, breathing hard, and felt a strange kind of pride. It was the first time in weeks, maybe months, that I felt like I had control over something. That small win gave me momentum. I started going to the gym after work, not just half-heartedly like I had before, but with purpose. The first week, I felt sore in places I didn't even know had muscles. But soon I started to notice changes. My posture straightened, my shoulders set back. When I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror, I didn't see the same hollow-eyed version of myself who had sat through that humiliation in the backyard. At work, I threw myself into projects I had been coasting through before. I volunteered to take on trickier tickets, stayed late learning the new software system our department was rolling out. My boss noticed. One Friday, she stopped by my desk. "You've been killing it lately, Lucas," she said with a smile. "How would you feel about leading the training session next week?" A few months ago, I would have hesitated. I would have worried about standing in front of everyone, about messing up. But that day, I just nodded. Yeah, I'd like that. And when I ran that session the following Wednesday, I didn't just get through it. I crushed it. People asked questions, and I had answers. When I wrapped up, there was even a little applause. That night, walking out of the building into the cool evening air, I felt lighter, taller, like I was finally stepping into my own skin. I started making other changes too. Practical ones. I broke my last tie to my parents' house by changing my permanent address everywhere. DMV, bank, HR department at work. It was strangely satisfying to see my own name with my own apartment address on official mail, like proof that I existed outside of them. Then, I started saving seriously. I cut out unnecessary expenses, picked up a few freelance IT gigs on the weekends, and watched my bank account grow. Every time I transferred money into savings, I felt like I was building a little wall between me and the past. Around this time, I met a couple of people who would quietly become my support system. One was James, a guy from the gym who noticed me struggling with my deadlift form one night. Instead of laughing, he offered a few tips, and soon we were spotting each other regularly. He had this calm, steady way about him that reminded me what healthy encouragement looked like. No guilt trips, no backhanded comments. The other was Sarah, a coworker who started eating lunch with me after that training session. She was sharp, funny, and had a knack for making me laugh on days I didn't think I could. One afternoon, over coffee, I mentioned, vaguely, that I was having some family stuff. She nodded like she understood more than I said. Sometimes family's just who you share DNA with, she said. The real family is the people who show up for you. That line stuck with me. The more I built this little circle outside my family, the less power the old guilt had over me. When mom would call and leave another voicemail, "We're having dinner this Sunday. You should come." I didn't get that panic twist in my stomach anymore. I just deleted it. And with every ignored message, every weekend spent living my own life instead of sitting silently at their table, I felt stronger. About 6 months after the celebration, I moved into a new apartment, a bigger one, with sunlight pouring through the windows in the morning and a view of the park across the street. On move-in day, as I set the last box down and looked around at the empty living room, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: pride. This place was mine, paid for with my money, filled with my things, no trace of my family's shadow on it. The first night there, I sat on the floor with a cheap pizza and a folding chair and just breathed. And even as I started to feel good again, genuinely good, I never forgot what had happened. Every time I saw that faint scar on my cheek in the mirror, I remembered the punch, the banner, the laughter. But now, instead of making me feel small, it fueled me. I started keeping a journal, writing down every little thing I accomplished, every PR at the gym, every freelance payment, every time my boss complimented me. It was like keeping score, but this time the score was mine. And slowly, an idea started forming in the back of my mind. I didn't act on it yet. I wasn't ready. But late at night, as I sat by the window with the city lights glowing outside, I would think about what real accountability might look like. What it might feel like to make sure Adam never got to laugh at my pain again. And when those thoughts came, I didn't push them away. I let them sit. Because this new version of me, the one who stood taller, who owned his space, who didn't flinch when someone said no, was patient. And when the time came, I knew I'd be ready. The first spark of the plan came on a rainy Thursday afternoon, almost by accident. I had just finished work when my boss called me into her office. "Lucas," she said, smiling, "we've been impressed with how you've stepped up these past few months. There's an opening on the systems security team. I think you'd be perfect for it." I accepted on the spot. The new role came with a raise, better hours, and access to training I'd only dreamed about before. Over the next few weeks, I immersed myself in cybersecurity coursework, firewalls, compliance, data privacy laws. The more I learned, the more my brain started connecting dots I hadn't seen before. See, Adam had always been reckless with money. He borrowed from everyone, friends, cousins, even our grandmother once, and he never paid back on time. He was always one brilliant idea away from being broke. One night, while I was sorting through some of my old mail, I found a letter from the bank. It was addressed to my parents' house, but it had my name on it, some old joint account my dad had opened years ago for family savings. I had almost forgotten about it. Curious, I logged in and froze. The balance was lower than I remembered. A lot lower. I pulled the statements and started scanning. Transfers. Withdrawals. Some as recent as 2 months ago. None of them authorized by me. And the name on almost every withdrawal? Adam. My hands went cold. I scrolled back further, heart hammering. Thousands of dollars had been siphoned out over the last year. Quietly. Almost casually. And my parents had said nothing. That was the moment the plan crystallized. I didn't yell. Didn't call them right away. Instead, I spent the next few days quietly gathering everything I could. I downloaded every statement, highlighted every transaction, created a neat little timeline of exactly how much Adam had taken and when. Then I scheduled a meeting with a lawyer. Sitting across from her in her sleek office, I slid the folder across the desk and explained the situation. She flipped through the pages, her eyebrows climbing higher with every line. "This is theft," she said simply. "And because it's a joint account, we can prove it. You'd have a strong case if you wanted to pursue legal action." I nodded, my expression calm, but inside something dark and sharp unfurled. "What about civil recovery?" I asked carefully. She smiled faintly. "That's an option too. You could recover not just the money, but damages." I left her office with a stack of papers and a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in months. But I didn't file anything. Not yet. Instead, I started playing nice. That Sunday, I showed up at my parents' house for dinner for the first time in months. Mom nearly dropped the serving spoon when she saw me standing in the doorway. "Lucas, what a surprise," she said, a little too brightly. Adam smirked from his seat at the table. "Look who finally decided to come around," he said. I smiled politely and sat down. "Yeah," I said, keeping my tone even. "I figured it's time to put the past behind us." Mom beamed, and I could see the relief wash over her face. She reached over to squeeze my hand. "That's all we wanted, sweetheart. Just for things to be normal again." I nodded, even as I pictured the folder sitting in my briefcase at home. The one with every piece of evidence I'd need to blow this whole normal fantasy apart. For the next few weeks, I played the part. I came to dinners, asked about Adam's projects, even laughed at a few of his jokes. I let them think I was back in my place, that the old Lucas, the one who swallowed every slight, had returned. But every time Adam bragged about some new expense, a weekend trip, a watch, a new gaming console, I filed it away. Every time Mom made a comment about how nice it is to have the family whole again, I smiled and nodded and thought about how poetic it would be when that illusion shattered. The final piece fell into place one evening when Dad let something slip. We were sitting in the living room after dinner, the news on in the background. He mentioned offhand that he and Mom had been talking about updating their will. "We want to make sure the house stays in the family," he said, glancing at Adam with a small smile. That's when I knew. Not just about the money, not just about the favoritism, but about how deep this went. They were planning to leave everything to Adam. And that was the perfect stage for what I was about to do. I went home that night, sat at my desk, and laid out the entire plan. It wasn't just about recovering what Adam had taken anymore. This was about balance. About finally forcing them to see me, not as the scapegoat, not as the overreacting brother, but as someone who couldn't be ignored anymore. I gathered the last of the documentation, double-checked it, and put it in a locked folder on my laptop. Then I called my lawyer and set up one more meeting. "Are you ready to move forward?" she asked when I sat down. I smiled, a small, cold smile that felt foreign on my face, but right all the same. "Yes," I said, "but I want to do this carefully, publicly." She raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. "That can be arranged." When I left her office that day, the sky was overcast, heavy with the promise of rain. But I felt lighter than I had in months. Because this time, I wasn't just reacting to what they had done. I was taking control. And when the moment came, they wouldn't see it coming until it was too late. I waited, not impatiently, not anxiously, just with the quiet, patient focus of someone who knows exactly what's coming. It took about a month for the perfect opportunity to present itself. Mom called me on a Tuesday evening, sounding almost cheerful. "We're having everyone over next Saturday," she said. "We want to talk about the future of the house. You should be here." There it was. I told her I'd be there, kept my tone light, and as soon as we hung up, I called my lawyer. "Saturday," I said. "Let's do it then." She didn't hesitate. "I'll have everything prepared." Saturday came warm and clear, deceptively peaceful for what I knew was about to happen. I arrived early, folder in hand, dressed sharper than usual, pressed shirt, polished shoes. Adam noticed. "What's with the outfit?" he asked with a smirk. "Big day," I said mildly, setting my folder down on the table. Everyone gathered in the living room. Mom, Dad, Adam, a couple of aunts and uncles. It felt almost like an intervention, but this time, I wasn't the one on the defensive. Dad cleared his throat. "We've been talking," he began, "and we think it's time we make things official. We want to put the house in Adam's name, start transferring things so it's easier later. We thought you'd want to be here for the conversation." Adam sat back in his chair, looking smug. as if this was his coronation. I nodded thoughtfully. I appreciate that, I said. And actually, I'm glad you brought this up, because I have something to share too. I opened the folder slowly, deliberately, and slid the first set of papers across the table. What's this? Mom asked, frowning. Bank statements, I said calmly. Every withdrawal from the joint savings account for the past 18 months. Every dollar Adam took without my permission. The room went very, very still. Adam's smirk faltered. You went through the account. It's my account too, I said, my voice steady. And I've already spoken to a lawyer. This, I tapped the paper with one finger, is theft. I have enough documentation to take it to court, criminal and civil. Mom's face went pale. Dad looked at Adam sharply. Is this true? Adam opened his mouth, closed it, then scoffed. Come on, it's not like he needed the money. I was just borrowing. That's not how joint accounts work, I cut in smoothly. You didn't borrow. You stole. And I have every transaction logged, down to the day and time. Silence. Then I slid the second set of papers across the table. This, I said, is a formal notice. If you transfer the house into Adam's name while this case is pending, it becomes part of the assets we can pursue for recovery. Mom gasped softly. You wouldn't. I would, I said, locking eyes with her. I'm done being the invisible son. I'm done pretending this family's version of normal is healthy. You wanted me here for this conversation. Now you have it. The room felt electric, every eye on me. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Adam laughed, short and harsh. You think you're going to take me to court? Over a few $1,000s. I smiled, calm, almost pleasant. It's not just a few thousand anymore. With damages, interest, and legal fees, we're looking at a number that might surprise you. And I'm fully prepared to file. The color drained from his face. You can't do this, Mom said, her voice rising. Yes, I can, I said quietly. And I will, unless every cent is repaid. In full. Within 30 days. The ultimatum hung in the air like a thunderclap. One of my uncles let out a low whistle. Sounds fair to me, he said under his breath. Adam shot him a glare, but it didn't matter. The momentum had shifted. For the first time, I watched my brother's face go from smug to uncertain. He looked at Dad, waiting for rescue. But Dad didn't say anything. He just rubbed a hand over his jaw, staring at the papers in front of him. Finally, he said, You need to fix this, Adam. And just like that, the room turned. The victory party had been public, so was this. I gathered the folder calmly, stood, and straightened my shirt. I'll be in touch through my lawyer, I said evenly. Enjoy the rest of your meeting. And then I walked out, head high, leaving them in stunned silence. When I got back to my car, I just sat there for a minute, breathing, letting the weight of what had just happened settle over me. I wasn't shaking this time. I wasn't angry. I just felt steady. For the first time in my life, I had been heard, really heard. And this time, there was no banner, no laughter, no dismissal. Just the sound of Adam realizing, maybe for the first time, that actions had consequences. And I wasn't done yet. The fallout began almost immediately. The very next morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Can we talk? Just us. I didn't answer right away. I made coffee, ate breakfast, went for a jog. I let her sweat a little. When I finally replied, it was simple. Sure. My place. Tonight. When she arrived, she looked smaller than I'd ever seen her, shoulders hunched, hands twisting in her lap as she sat on my couch. You didn't have to humiliate your brother like that, she said finally. I kept my voice calm. I didn't humiliate him. He humiliated himself. I just made sure no one could pretend it didn't happen. She winced, then tried another angle. Lucas, you know how Adam is. He's impulsive, but he's family. This doesn't have to go to court. We can make this right. Good, I said, leaning back. Because the 30-day clock started yesterday. She hesitated, clearly enthused to me not bending. We don't have that kind of money just lying around. Then you'd better start figuring it out, I said, my tone even. Sell something. Get a loan. Or have Adam get a job and start making payments. But I'm done being the bank of Lucas. For a long moment, she just stared at me. Then she sighed and nodded. You've changed, she said quietly. I didn't deny it. Over the next few weeks, I could feel the tension radiating off the family chat, even though no one addressed me directly. I started getting little updates through my cousins, whispers about Adam scrambling to find money, about Dad cashing in a small investment account to cover part of the repayment. 2 weeks in, Adam showed up at my apartment unannounced. He looked rough, dark circles under his eyes, hair a mess. "You're really gonna do this?" he demanded as soon as I opened the door. "Yes," I said simply. "This is insane," he snapped. "You're my brother." "Exactly," I said. "And you were supposed to treat me like one." He blinked, thrown by that. For once, he had no comeback. Finally, he shoved an envelope into my hand. "Here's the first half. The rest will be ready by the deadline. Happy now?" I didn't rise to the bait. "When I get the rest, I'll tell my lawyer to close the case." "Not before." He swore under his breath, but this time I didn't flinch. When the final payment came through, a wire transfer that nearly drained Adam's account, judging by the whispers I heard later, I forwarded the receipt to my lawyer. She called me the next day. "Well," she said with a note of satisfaction, "you're whole again. Congratulations." But it wasn't just about the money anymore. The real shift came the next Sunday, when I decided to stop by my parents' house unannounced. When I walked in, the usual chaos of Sunday dinner went quiet. Adam was there, but for once he wasn't lounging at the head of the table. He was quiet, subdued, barely meeting my eyes. Mom tried to fill the silence. "We're glad you came," she said softly. I nodded, took a seat, and let the quiet stretch. It wasn't hostile, just different. The balance had shifted. Halfway through dinner, Dad cleared his throat. "We've decided not to change the house deed right now," he said. "We're going to leave things as they are, at least until we figure out a fair plan for everyone." It was the first time I'd heard the word fair in that house in years. Adam scowled but didn't argue. When dinner was over, I stood and looked around the table. Mom's eyes were shining, maybe with tears, maybe with something else. Adam's jaw was tight. Dad's expression was unreadable. "This was nice," I said, and meant it, not because dinner had been pleasant, but because for once it had been quiet, balanced. As I headed for the door, Mom caught my arm. "Lucas," she said softly, "I'm sorry. It wasn't everything, but it was something." I nodded, then walked out into the cool evening air. Standing there by my car, I took a long breath and felt something settle in me. The anger, the shame, the humiliation, all of it had finally burned off, leaving something stronger behind. I got into the car, started the engine, and as I pulled away, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. I didn't see the quiet, invisible son anymore. I saw the man who made them listen. And for the first time in my life, I smiled and thought, I never needed their approval. I just needed them to know they couldn't break me.